what scared me most about it is when you're in that moment, when you're absorbed into anger, it's not like you're recognizing that you're being an asshole. It just feels good, right? I think maybe this is what, people who haven't experienced this, it does. It feels good to be angry when you're angry. But then, when you're looking back, it's like, oh shit, just you feel terrible about it afterwards. But in the moment, it's like this adrenaline going through you. And yeah, it's
like a drug.
It is. And that particular feeling always just scared the shit out of me, because it's very tempting when something feels good, even though it feels like shit afterwards, but
we talk about sometimes righteous or justified anger, but I think that's a kind of stupid idea as well. Like Aristotle has this idea that you can have moderate and righteous anger and it could be beneficial. And the Stoics, particularly Seneca, who wrote a whole book about it, are much clearer that this is a very dangerous idea, because who's the judge of whether your anger is moderate or righteous? Well, it's on you, buddy. Right? Well, I hate to break it to you, but every angry person thinks that they're justified, pretty much.
Yeah, they do.
Angry people are self-righteous as anything, and so they all believe that it's everyone else's fault and they're right, and even though from an outside point of view we might think that's laughable, it seems kind of convincing when you're angry. That's part of the problem. I should say, the Stoics thought anger was the main. Just a little bit of trivia for you. We normally divide the negative emotions into 3 categories in psychotherapy, just for the sake of simplicity, right? So we'll say it's anger, fear, and sadness. Take your pick. I've got a bit of both. Got a bit of all 3. So anger, fear, and sadness. Now, psychotherapists, you will have heard, deal with fear in the form of anxiety disorders, and they deal with sadness in the form of clinical depression. We've got a lot of that kind of stuff. Anger, maybe a little bit here and there, but not as much. There's a third, if you like, of that classification that we don't deal with as much. We get angry clients, but it's usually depressed clients who have a bit of anger, or sometimes anxious clients who have a bit of anger. It's rare that somebody would self-refer because their main presenting problem is anger. Now, those people do end up in therapy, usually because they're referred by someone else. So in relationships, it might be their spouse that says, you need therapy to deal with your anger. Or in an institution like a prison, or a school, or the military, somebody might be told, you need to go and talk to a therapist about your anger problem. They'll say, who, me? It's not my problem. It's you guys that need therapy. Because anger is an externalizing emotion. And one of the cognitive biases is that we tend to attribute blame to other people. Now, one of the problems with that is it means we're unlikely to seek help for it itself. Now, one of the social problems with that, I'll make a big point here about self-help and stuff in general. If you say, well, forget about therapy and stuff like that, we'll just forget about parenting, we're just going to let people do self-help. We live in a self-help culture. There's self-help all over the internet. It's some of the best-selling books are in self-help. There's all chunks of bookshops dedicated to it. The internet's like awash with self-help advice. Right? Problem is that if the problem is with your judgment and perspective in the first place, and particularly if you're angry, and so you think it's everyone else that needs therapy, you're not going to, not many people are going to seek out self-help to deal with a primary problem of anger. And so anger ends up being untreated in a self-help society. And people read books and they do their little worksheets and they do their meditations and stuff like that. And if you're not careful, one way in which self-help can become toxic, and does become toxic, on a huge societal scale, is when it turns into a form of avoidance. And people are, I'm working on myself, but they're working on the wrong feelings. They're not working on the feelings that are actually the problem. They're working on everything else. It's kind of like there's a big fire blazing over here, and you're just kind of going, yeah, but just let me fix this leaking tap over here. I'm doing something constructive. You go, dude, your house is burning down. That's where I think people have a hard time understanding that. They go, but I'm doing something constructive. Yeah, you're doing something constructive while ignoring this huge problem that you've got and doing nothing about, then it's a diversion from putting the work in where it needs to happen. I think that's clearly an issue. We could all go off right now and look on YouTube videos by famous self-help and self-improvement gurus, particular ones that might actually say and do things that are unhelpful in this regard. And we could look at the comments under them and find many examples of angry, usually young men, but not always, like saying angry and aggressive and violent stuff. But yet they're supposed to be watching self-improvement videos and reading self-improvement books. And I think this is a cultural phenomenon, but there was similar things happened in the ancient world to some extent. The Sophists, and by the way, Plato's Republic is in some ways is about this. Thrasymachus, should just look him up on Wikipedia, is the sophist at the beginning of Plato's Republic. Oh man, many people have observed he couldn't sound more like Nietzsche, and he also kind of sounds a bit like Jordan Peterson at times, and guys like that. So the main guy that Socrates is arguing with, he sounds kind of familiar anyway. I'll let people argue between themselves about who he sounds most like. I think it's fair to say he sounds quite a lot like Nietzsche. But you'll see echoes of this in modern self-improvement gurus. And so the Sophists were doing this kind of same thing. But they had a whole career about helping people to improve themselves. But Thrasymachus thinks anger is good. And his name means fierce fighter, incidentally, in Greek. So it's kind of like a pun, perhaps. But he, so he's encouraging people to focus on areas of self-improvement, but in the process neglecting this one glaring flaw in their character, which is their hostility and anger and bigotry and prejudice and whatnot towards other members of the society in which they live, and their lack of pro-social attitudes. Thrasymachus thought pro-social attitudes were guff. He actually goes on about how he thinks these people are like sheep. It's for the weak, he says. It's kind of might is right philosophy, and he thinks that the virtue of justice is garbage, he thinks, and it's he's pretty explicitly says he thinks it's a kind of con that the weak in society are duped by. Obviously that sounds a lot like Nietzsche. Maybe people might say it's a caricature of Nietzsche, but it's hard to read them side by side and not think. There's obviously some similarity going on there. Nietzsche stuff about slave morality and all that sounds very like what Thrasymachus is saying about the sheep that follow justice. And so Socrates allegedly tries to demolish this argument. So I don't know, people may or may not agree with what Socrates says, but go and check it out. It's only book one of Plato's Republic. He systematically takes this argument apart in several levels.
Cool.
But I think this is an endemic problem in modern society.